This is the Neo Show, where the minds shaping tomorrow speak today. Brought to you by Neo, the browser redefining what AI can do for you. So we hold these talks every week. Right now, we have a couple people from our user community. They're always free to come in, ask a question, perhaps if they have one.
Great.
So why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, why someone should be listening.
Yeah, going way back to the beginning, I grew up in Georgia, if you have any Southern listeners. And then I went to Harvard where I studied econ and data science and quickly made my way out to San Francisco where I was number 12 at Mercor. I was the first woman on the team. And so joined, it was just about a year ago, but obviously they've grown really quickly. So got to see that really meteoric growth from 12 people to where they're at today. And I worked on the operations team, so I got to work with several of the frontier labs, got a lot of exposure to what's new in AI development. And then now I'm working on my own startup and company, which I'm excited about. Primarily, we kind of call our tagline the AI R&D toolkit, because being such a new industry, I think practices are pretty disparate among different companies. They're often like learnings are concentrated in the frontier labs. And so we want to do what we can to really facilitate growth across different smaller companies and enterprises that want to incorporate AI into their tools and workflows. So having an internal research motion and building tools that lets other people iterate faster.
Awesome. Hi, Howie.
1 second.
No
No
problem.
worries. I think we can maybe just get the first question from the community out the way. Of course, you saw quite a bit of scale. So what was that like?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it was kind of unprecedented and unpredicted growth. So yeah, I would say there are a lot of things that I take out of the experience. I think mostly every single individual at Mercor I can point to and say they're exceptional. So I think they did a great job of building out their internal team with people that all bring unique value to the company. Everyone's incredibly smart and driven, and I think they've done a great job of fostering a culture that wants to really work hard and together. And so that in itself was a really positive experience. Um, and then beyond that, of course, I think I got to learn so much. I think being a relatively new company, you can think that it's hard to differentiate yourself in the world of AI, which is an inherently very technical space. AI is a very technical product and it requires a lot of research and development. So to have a company made by some young, not the most technical founders, and be able to succeed in this space is really interesting. And what Mercor boils down to is aggregating talent across a variety of different industries. And so they found their niche that they can play in, which is just connecting talent with labs that want to learn from that talent. So there's a lot of different spaces, I think, to contribute in AI, and Mercor found its niche.
Cool, very cool. Hey, Piper, great to
Hi,
see
good to
you
see you again.
So it looks like you have a company name between last time we talked and then today.
Yeah, so the company that I'm building is called Pipelines. So you can find us at buildpipelines.com. We don't have anything public yet as far as a product, and so we're releasing an early beta, hopefully in the next month or two, to some early design partners so they can help us test and iterate on the product. I myself only left Mercor 6 weeks ago, so it's been a whirlwind since then. Chatting with like a lot of founders in the space and companies that would be interested in expanding their tooling set. So it's been a lot of fun.
Nice. Did you have a chance to use Neo yet?
Yeah, I did. So Axel and I were talking about that a bit. I was saying that I'm like usually pretty traditional as far as my browser, and so I'm just kind of a Chrome girl. So I haven't gotten the chance to experiment with a lot of different browsers. So it was really cool getting to test out Neo.
Okay, what's your first impression at least?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a person that just like loves a good UI, and I think Neo is super simple, which is like what you want out of a browser, is like being able to pull out the relevant information quickly, I think the automatic like tab filtering and categorization is really valuable because I'm a person that sometimes has dozens of tabs open at once. So that's like a pretty fascinating feature as well.
Really, really cool. So let us know, additional feedback. So Axel, you already asked Piper about, what's the secret sauce of Mercor, right? I guess that's where, please continue, Axel. You may have other questions.
Yeah, well, I'm super curious. Sort of, you obviously had that experience seeing the unprecedented growth, and now developing something that's more entirely your own. Any advice, anything maybe you took away from that experience that you're applying now today?
Yeah. So I think going back to like part of what I mentioned in my previous answer, which is that Mercor just did an excellent job of building out its internal team. I think the quality of your first hires is really influential to the trajectory and growth of your company. And there's so much talent in the AI space. And actually, like in this current market, there's also a huge competition for that talent. And so convincing folks that like your company is the one that's doing something new and that's going to grow, I think can be a challenge. And so I think hiring is something that's shouldn't be underestimated, is really important to get the right talent on your team. But more so, always like fostering a culture of belief in your company. I think naturally, Mercor, before it's had its meteoric growth, the founders were working on it for a year or two before it ever became kind of a brand name. And so the road to growth can be slow at first, and then suddenly you have this exponential explosion just because you stumbled on the right niche or you stumbled on the right market. And so I think having an understanding that growth may be slow at first and you have to kind of keep digging and persisting as a team to find where you can really be valuable. I would say that would be my initial takeaways from Mercor.
Piper, like you said, the founders had been working on this for a while, right? It wasn't like sort of the super great growth from the day one.
Yeah.
What was can you describe, can you give us some insights into what's that transition? What's the tipping point? What's the, interesting new opportunity, and how they were able to grab it? Because, opportunities for everyone, right? In some ways. So can you just give more details?
Yeah, I think in business, a lot of times you can come across like really great opportunity just by being in the right place at the right time. So Mercor originally positioned itself as a talent marketplace. And so everything that they were originally building out was focused on talent matching, so people for opportunities, and they weren't necessarily focused on this human data market. And then they came to find that that was a big opportunity. And so when they first got their initial contracts, they still weren't sold on, whether they wanted to completely shift the company direction to focus solely on human data, or whether they wanted to maintain more of their original focus on full-time hiring.
It may be obvious to you, but can you give concrete example? What's before and after? What's the difference? Because, it may be obvious to you, but can you elaborate?
Yeah, so I would say it all boils down to a shift in focus and direction. And so the initial focus of the company was more on full-time placements or even remote contract placements, but for a variety of roles. And the niche where they really dialed in ended up being human data. And so they really don't do much business outside of the human data market. It's pretty much all these projects that they're running to collect data for frontier labs, and they're connecting talent with the labs.
Give us an example of the human data.
Yeah. So I think that you could pick out almost any profession, and there's like a project where you could suck data out of for that profession. But an example might be mathematicians. And so Mercor might place 100 mathematicians to work with X lab, and they're producing data sets of complex mathematical problems that will be used for post-training models.
Basically building data for post-training or maybe even pre-training purposes.
Exactly.
For the foundation model, right?
Exactly.
And so before it was like looking for great engineer or great whatever for working for some companies. Now it's like just the data. Of course, data is generated by human. They still need to do the recruitment work, but the outcome is the data, not the humans more, right?
Yeah, and a huge part of Mercor's company now is actually the internal operations team that runs these projects. So it's not a simple question of finding this talent and then your stake in the game is over. They actually have a really large operations team, which I was a part of, that they rely on to actually execute on these projects. So it's not only finding these individuals, but also managing them, understanding how these data collection projects are going,
Right.
and like pulling traditional operational levers to make sure that the project is on track.
One more thing on Mercor, before we transition to things that more general is
Sure.
the ChatGPT moment happened, what, 3.5 years, no, 3 years ago, right? Roughly, yeah, actually exactly 3 years ago. And why Mercor, started having this opportunity about a year and a half ago, not like 2 years ago, not 2.5 years ago. What's the magic moment of this a year and a half ago?
Yeah, so the first thing I'll say is that this space did exist pre-Mercor. And so some other large players are Scale, Turing, Surge. They're all players that do almost the exact same thing as Mercor. And so Mercor has been able to get kind of a larger and larger share of the pie just by executing well. But in concrete terms, Scale, Surge, Turing, they're all still bigger than Mercor. And Mercor has kind of just been able to wedge themselves into this space by executing well. And so I think that you'll continue to see competition in this market just because labs usually like to diversify between their data vendors. And so they don't want to have full reliance on one or two vendors. But it's definitely a place where Mercor saw the opportunity to enter and succeed just by executing well and like leading the frontier as far as more complex data types. And so this is something that all of their competitors do as well. But the industry kind of shifted as far as what kind of data was useful for training. And so as models become more capable, the data that becomes useful also has to become increasingly complex. So data that used to be useful is no longer useful because models can already do that.
Right. And I was sharing with one of my coworkers, Rex, today about this conversation, and he asked me, "Hey, what does Mercor do?" And I explained to him. He said, "Geez, right? I thought AI working for me, but we are working for AI now." Any take on that?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the whole premise of AGI is that someday AI and technology will be so capable that it can do anything that a human can do, at least virtually or on the web. Robotics is like a whole other conversation of what AI may be able to one day do physically. And I will say I have less expertise and knowledge there, so I can't really comment. But as far as like virtual web-based tasks, there's an idea that AI may once be able to do everything that a human can do. But so long as there are things that humans can do that AI cannot, humans are valuable for training. And again, there's such a wealth of data and knowledge out there on the internet, whether it's proprietary and owned by internal companies, or whether it's just information that exists on the web. There's a wealth of knowledge, of course, that has been used for pre-training. But as far as making AI truly capable, you usually need pretty custom, precise, and structured data in order for it to be effective for training. And that's where humans become useful.
So it's mostly for post-training, not for the pre-training data.
Yep, I would say almost like far and away.
And now what you are doing is creating tools for, whether Mercor, of the world can collect those data faster, better. Is that the notion?
Yeah, exactly. So I think my entire thesis on the space, at least my hope, is that AI development will become more democratized. Obviously, I think Axel and I were also perhaps speaking about this a bit earlier, but who Mercor primarily works with is those frontier labs, the big 6 or 7. And those are the folks among whom know-how is currently concentrated. So they all have their own proprietary systems for training, they all have their own data, and they all have their own systems for evaluating how effective is this data for training, what are the most effective training methods, et cetera. And they're creating, for the most part, generalizable models that are able to do a number of really complex tasks. So I think it's ultimately a research question of where AI ends up settling. Do we create one super capable model that does everything? Or is a more effective system smaller, optimized models for either certain industries, domains, tasks, and then you get into tool use where, right now you have agents that are often workflow executors. There's like a whole area of research that's looking into autonomous agents, which don't need predefined workflows and can just interact with tools autonomously. And then the question becomes, how do you train that and how do you make it safe? And I think these are all ultimately research questions. What's the most effective training method? What data do I need? How many models are optimal? Can we make one super model, or do we need 20 optimized models to do different things? I think those are all research questions. And I think without good software, it's really hard to answer those questions. And so that's ultimately what we're trying to build is the toolkit for anything that you need in the AI R&D lifecycle. And so that's anywhere from collecting the initial data, evaluating your model, and then doing training. And so obviously we can't tackle all of those things at once. And so in the beginning, we're focusing on software that makes data collection and evaluations easier. And then down the road, we want to move on to more advanced applications.
Making the evaluation easier. What's the pinpoint that you ran into in the past? Like, hey, you hired 100 math experts, and then they are going to give you the data. So what is the pinpoint here?
Yeah, so I think the whole purpose of evaluations is one, measuring how capable the model is, but there are a number of different metrics that you want to understand before you feel fully confident in a model or AI in general. And so if it is just a chat-based outcome, there are, again, a number of things that you'll want to measure. So accuracy, precision, context recall sometimes. But there might be like an infinite number of criteria that you care about. And so as far as being able to evaluate effectively, you have to design the evaluation thoughtfully. So what criteria do I actually care about measuring? And then how do I know that I'm measuring it well? And so I think with like current evaluation systems, sometimes the problem could become at any point. And so it may be I'm asking the wrong questions, I'm evaluating the wrong things, my method for evaluation is off, and so the actual outputs that I'm getting, I can't really trust. So there are a number of places where you could go wrong. I think the most fail-proof way of evaluating something is through human feedback. And so if you have humans that you've verified that you can trust, their evaluations are going to end up being the most accurate and the most specific. But human evaluations are also like the hardest to collect and measure at scale. And so I think that's the software that we want to enable the most, is moving beyond just automated evaluations, which may or may not be trustworthy, and enabling folks to measure that against human evaluations. So not only can they perhaps just get more accurate evaluations in general, but also fine tune whatever their automated evaluation is so they can ensure alignment.
Cool. I kind of expect, for instance, you mentioned the Scale.ai. They have been doing this for, many years. They would have similar software for themselves, at least, right? I would imagine so.
Yeah, and so it's a good point. It's not that there aren't competitors in this market. I do think Scale is one of these human data providers that has built more internal software than others. I think for the most part, I know that Scale has some self-serve software, although having not used it myself, I can't attest to like the extent that it's usable and available. But generally our approach is not providing the talent or actually executing or prescribing exactly what you should be doing, but rather providing the toolkit and the platform so that your internal team can do this easily. What we want to err away from is like being very prescriptive regarding what you should be evaluating, and necessitate that we fulfill your operations and just deliver the insights to you. We want to create a platform that's just really easy to use from a self-serve perspective. And so, that entails being able to design things really easily, having a pretty comprehensive suite of criteria that you might be interested in, and ensuring internally that all of those things are accurate and effective before we roll it out to external users.
Cool. So you stumble on this opportunity because you worked at Mercor, right? You saw the need. And one thing I was quite impressed is, you kind of left the Mercor before, the 1 year anniversary. That means that you may give up a lot of the stocks, of a high-flying startup. What's in your mind? Like, you don't care, or you feel like, wow, this is nothing. Like, can you share with us your thought process? And also, you are kind of probably got a funding immediate after you left, which means you are kind of in the lucky um, sort of the camp. What's your advice to other people who wanted to start a company tomorrow?
Yeah, absolutely. So there were definitely a lot of things that went into this decision. Like you said, I left pretty shortly before my 1 year anniversary. So I left a lot of equity and financial upside on the table. I think for me, what I find ultimately most fulfilling is being able to define the direction of something and feel like I have a big impact. And while I have immense respect for everyone at Mercor and had an incredible time working with them, I felt like my scope and my impact was getting limited as the company grew, and I no longer uh, felt that I could have as much impact as I wanted. And so that was a big reason. Again, also, I found like a huge passion for smart products and software. And working on operations at Mercor, we didn't really have a lot of software to support what we were doing. And it was always a passion of mine to be able to build something that would have made my life easier as an operator. And so knowing that I wasn't going to be able to do that at Mercor, I was really eager to be able to go out and build that for myself.
That makes a lot of sense. One of the, our last news show guest said
Yeah,
the way he looked at the doing startup is almost like doing something you are passionate, but rich
yeah,
people paying you to do that. That's
yeah,
an interesting way to
yeah.
describe it.
Exactly. And the very last point I'll make here is I feel like sometimes like just chatting about AI can make you a little bit existential, like where is my job going to go? What is the future going to look like? Like where should I be working and what's the most effective use of my time right now? And I think there is a lot of uncertainty regarding what the future will look like as far as like how are we going to be integrating AI and how is the world going to change as a result of this? And if you do take things to the extreme, then I have to think, how many more opportunities do I have to build something that's going to be really useful before I don't have that opportunity anymore? And so, because the area is so exciting and like building a company is something that I've wanted to do for a long time, and I felt like I have an idea and a product that can make an impact on the way that people are developing I felt like now was the time to do it. And things move so fast that you don't want to see the opportunity pass you by.
You're one of those people who believe that the opportunities, for entrepreneurs are going to be smaller and smaller because of AGI is approaching. Is that what you're saying?
It's hard to say. I don't want to make too many like definitive statements regarding like what the future is going to look like. I think there have been immense moments of change in history prior, and sometimes the world doesn't change as much as you think it will. And I definitely don't believe in any doomsday scenario, but I think the world will look different. And um, I think at least like the areas where you may be able to work may look different. And I think a lot of people that buy into the future of work believe that things again will change in some way. And so I don't think that entrepreneurship will disappear. But I have to say that like I have uncertainty over what the future does look like. And so
So you
just
have an
given that
urgency to work on a problem that you are able to see today. And then, that's the reason you wanted to leave and then do it. Now,
exactly.
you got a funding right away, right? And not
Yeah.
everyone is going to be as lucky, right? For people are thinking, well, what is your advice?
Totally. And I do consider myself quite lucky to have received funding because obviously that gives us more flexibility and momentum to be able to build faster. But regardless, I think I'm someone who's always pursued the next exciting thing. And I think even without the promise of funding, I mean, I left before I had any talks with investors. And so there was definitely, it definitely wasn't certain that I was going to receive funding. And I think if you believe in your idea, it actually may take like a little pressure off your back to be able to build kind of quietly for a few months without having the pressure of investors or the pressure of like needing to move quickly. And so I think it's more about like enjoying the journey. And if you have like a strong belief in something, I do think like the passion needs to be there. Otherwise, you might find yourself like second guessing, leaving your stable job. But I think if you have a strong belief in something, then it's worth pursuing.
I have one more question before, Axel, close out this session for us. By the way, Axel is actually, applying for schools like Stanford,
Yeah.
I know you graduated from Harvard, right?
Yeah.
You just mentioned, hey, there are a lot of, no, I'm not sure a lot, but there are opportunities for you to pursue here and now, and then you want to pursue that. What's your advice to, the younger generation, including your peers, including even younger people like Excel, like how to think about it? Like, everyone should quit their job, quit their education, or, education is still very important. What did you get out of the, Harvard, and then how to think about this topic?
Yeah, it's a great question. I do think if I were to go back in time a few years, like having had the opportunity to go to Harvard, I definitely would again. I think that ultimately, like one of the most important things in this world is like human connection and like being able to build community and experiences. And I think college is a great place to experiment, learn what you're passionate about, meet really awesome people, professors, and build a community. And so I think for all of those reasons, like I really enjoyed my college experience, although of course
So
there are other
the
ways to build those
relationship,
things.
the network you got, right? Again,
Yeah.
our last guest on your show said, well, in order for you to go to YC, there are a few things. One of the things is go to the dorm with your co-founder. So that's an important part of the education. Please go on.
Yeah. And the other thing is I would just say to pursue again, I think like the underlying through line here is that you should pursue something that you're passionate about. I do think if I were to go back in time, I'm like very happy with what I chose to study, but being now in the AI space, maybe I would have become an engineer just because I discovered after college that I was like really interested in products. And that wasn't something that I knew back in college. And so I think, always feel free to pursue what you're interested in the time, but I would encourage keeping an open mind to like whatever you go in with. I would try to get exposure to a lot of different things to
You
like
meant
understand
to
like
say
what really
that
drives you.
if you go back to time, you might, choose the computer science as example.
Yeah, although, I've heard arguments from folks that, software engineers are going to get taken over by AI. So I think like it's never a bad thing to have a technical background. I think um, engineers are in super high demand everywhere. And I think being technical teaches you to think a certain way about like problems and solutions. And I think, that's something that really appeals to me. And I'm like, computer science would have been a really good fit because I love like figuring out how to solve problems. And I think you can create really clean, beautiful solutions through software, which is something that like I love. But yeah, I guess I don't really know if I ever got around to the root of your question, which is like, what is my ultimate advice? I do think that like my personal perspective is the world is going to continue to change a lot. And so my personal mantra is like I don't think more than 5 years ahead. It's like, what is the most valuable thing for me to be doing right now? What's the most interesting thing to me right now? And what am I most passionate about? And this is what I'm going to like chase down for the next few years. And a few years from now, the world may look different, my life may look different. And at that point, I'll figure out what to do next.
I have to say, quite a few insights there. I'm wondering, so certainly you're a proponent of seeking out the human relations as there's a great deal of value there. And that's actually a repeated trend and a common theme we hear. But I'm wondering, particularly for, let's say, higher academic institutions, do you believe that your education there from a professor perspective, let's say, do you think those tools were particularly useful to you today? As in, one could, try their best to become well integrated into the incubator community of San Francisco, and maybe they would achieve the same human relations as, dorming in Harvard.
Really good
Excel is
question.
trying hard to see whether he can save his parents some, big tuition. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
Well, I actually will say, I think it's a really good question. Again, I wouldn't trade my experience at Harvard for anything. I developed awesome relationships. I was also on the rowing team while I was there, and I think that was a huge part of my experience that I really enjoyed. And I'm glad that I got to see that out. But as far as a personal network goes, I actually think the people that I've met in San Francisco and at Mercor are ended up being like more valuable to me for where I am right now than the folks that I met at Harvard. Even so, like I have a lot of strong relationships there, and I don't want to underplay how much I value the folks that I've met at Mercor. But as far as like being in San Francisco and being in the tech scene, I think that it's kind of like you said, Howie, is that you kind of can develop a network and relationships with folks wherever you go. That's also why I love startups is actually when I started at Mercor, I was like, this is just like college. Like we had a group of 20, like 23-year-olds just like working together, and it felt like a group project kind of. And so I actually was more intellectually fulfilled having worked at a startup than having been to Harvard, because it ended up that what I studied at Harvard didn't really necessarily translate to what I ended up doing in my career. And so though I learned a lot, met a lot of great people and had a great experience, as far as like tangible skills and relationships that I'll carry like throughout my profession directly, I actually think that the better incubator for that was in San Francisco.
I'm curious what's in your mind. Like, for instance, hey, I would, with all the hindsight, I should have skipped Harvard, started Mercor myself a few years back. Or, hey, there are always opportunities. Harvard is so important, and then it's going to set me for success for the long career ahead of me. And just, I still do it. I'm just curious what's in your mind.
I'm kind of a believer in the butterfly effect, where like if you change one thing, you never know how other things down the line might change. And so I guess from like a purely theoretical perspective, if I could like snap a few fingers and change the trajectory exactly how I would want it, then that kind of seems appealing. But I also don't think I would have wanted to trade like the early years of my youth for the really fast-paced grinding of kind of like where I exist today. Even though I've always been a person that like really appreciates working hard, like I'm a live to work kind of person. I don't think I'll ever retire. I always love working on problems, and that's like what makes me happy. But even so, I think I'm glad that I got to enjoy my time as an academic a little bit more, as opposed to working on things directly, because in a very cliche way, it just gave me time to kind of like broaden my mind. And like I said, experiment with like a lot of different domains. And so I think like for those reasons, I'm glad that I kind of had the time to both explore athletics, explore friendships and relationships, explore different disciplines at Harvard, and study a lot of different topics without having to produce anything concretely other than homework. And I think like for those reasons, it was valuable for me personally, even though of course, like monetarily and professionally, I may have not ended up using many of those things.
Okay, I think Excel get a clear answer. Stanford is still important. Maybe Harvard, who knows? But the what about the intensity? Like from school days versus startup. Which one is more intense?
Startup.
I heard that if you read the Wall Street Journal, right, 996 is in San Francisco, right, 9 o'clock to 9 o'clock, 6 days a week. What's your reaction to 996?
Yeah, I think it's actually super dependent on the company. I think that the ideal state of affairs is that your team is just so motivated and excited to work that you don't have to superficially impose some kind of working hours, but rather everybody chooses to be in the office because that's what they like to do. And I think that's how things started at Mercor, is even though, they were very upfront with, we work long hours, we work 6 days a week, sometimes seven, and this is just what we do. It was also what I wanted to do. I loved being in the environment. I loved being around my team, and I loved working hard.
Basically, 996 is what you're looking for. Anyone sleeps in the office?
Yeah, a few people did.
Not you.
I never slept in the office.
Okay, but there are people. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Hey, since this is an AI talk, I wanted to at least close off this interview with some AI questions. I don't know, Axel, you have anything? One thing that I'm interested is, now you are kind of starting your own company, and you already did a work, you already did some work at Mercor. If without AI, do you think your productivity will be totally different? I think the answer is somewhat yes, but I would like you to articulate it to the rest of the audience. How's the AI change the way you run the company, you do work in the company?
Yeah, I will say, like for where I am right now, like in the building stage, um, AI is less useful for like traditional administrative things. Like I still use spreadsheets and like input things manually. For my work at Mercor, I was using AI all the time. And I think especially for like the early iterations of the product for my new company, it wouldn't have been possible, frankly, without AI. Having not studied computer science myself, like I mentioned, it's really empowering to have like the really strong AI coding tools like Claude and Cursor. It being, I call myself moderately technical, but being someone who is like primarily experienced in data science and not so much in like traditional software engineering, it was still a learning curve to kind of get to know the tools and how to use them. But then I felt like incredibly liberated by being able to kind of dream up a product and just be able to iterate with some of these AI coding tools and like see the product kind of come into being. I think like that is actually a huge reason why I ended up taking a leap and starting this company, because I could see the product that I wanted in front of me just by using some of these tools. And like it gave me the confidence that like this is a product worth building out, and it's possible to build. And so I would say that's how it like influenced it in the early days. And I would still say like most of my AI usage is like centered around coding, and I don't use it so much in like other areas of the business like GTM or
I think you told me before that you learned Python at Mercor, right?
yeah.
And but you are not a kind of a professional Python programmer, day in and a day out kind of person. So I'm assuming that this AI coding agent is really useful for you because now you kind of we democratized the coding so that even if you are not a Python coder day in and day out, you are able to leverage Python just like a traditional Python programmer. Is that how you feel, or what's your experience?
Yeah, I would say that is how I feel. I think having some background in a technical sense. So I pretty much knew some Python. I was pretty good in R, knew some SQL, but again, I wasn't like a programmer. But I do think having learned some of these languages before and having taken classes and whatnot and done some coding independently, it makes it easier to use the tools, primarily because when you're interacting with something like Claude or Cursor, you can kind of identify when it starts to get off track, and you can identify what mistakes it's making and how you need to prompt it such that it'll fix it. Because sometimes Claude or Cursor, especially if you're working with a large code base, it won't be able to pick out the exact problem, or it'll just go in circles. And so there's still some value in having some like basic intuition and knowledge regarding coding such that you can use more intelligent prompting to point it in the right direction and intuit like what might be wrong. But beyond that, I think it's super enabling. And actually, I learn a lot from using it just based on like the outputs that I'm able to get.
Cool. You give me the thing I was looking for, which is you would still do college, because that make you a more rounded person,
Yeah.
and then you would still learn computer science because that would make your even current startup CEO jobs easier. Sounds like, or better.
Yeah.
That's very good. Excel.
Yeah, just briefly, I was wondering, you mentioned Cursor, Claude. What tools are you currently using, and perhaps your preference?
Yeah, I would say I'm pretty model agnostic actually. I like to bounce around. I think ChatGPT having like come out first and being like the biggest name brand, it's often one that I'll just gravitate to for basic things. But sometimes I find its responses like pretty wordy. But it's funny, like having used a lot of different models for different things, I do think they all have distinct kind of personalities. And so I like Claude and Gemini. I find them to be a bit more succinct and technical than ChatGPT sometimes. But I would still say that, if I'm just doing something really quick, I'll usually go to ChatGPT. And then for coding, Claude and Cursor. But beyond that, I haven't done a lot of experimentation with like creating agents for personal workflows and things like that. So the main tools that I use are still basically like the chatbots and the coding tools.
Since Axel asked the tools, I can't help asking another question. Maybe it's sort of a small, but can you share with one tip that you are leveraging AI tools, like, so that you are more productive? Whether you share some findings, some new tools you ran into recently, or a way of you do things differently to make yourself more productive.
Yeah, I think I think the most relevant thing that I could speak to right now as like a new founder is there are so many administrative things that need to be done. And as like an early founder, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. So as a founder, there are so many companies out there, whether they're established or startups themselves that assist with elements of like business formation. And so I don't know if this is necessarily AI native, but I think, I'll ask ChatGPT for like recommendations regarding like what provider do you recommend for X, Y, or Z item. And then I get like a suite of options of folks that have already tackled one of like the administrative challenges that I'm facing as a founder. And then I'm able to just like leverage resources of companies that have been optimized for this one exact thing. And so I use AI heavily for like recommendations as far as like companies and tools that I should be using, such that again, I don't have to like build out everything internally because I'm a big fan of utilizing software where it exists.
Huh, that's very interesting. Didn't think about it before because, I'm a startup advisor here and there.
Yeah.
Did not realize ChatGPT has taken that job away from me now because you don't really need to talk to me. You just ask a ChatGPT about it. Uh,
I still talk to my investors as well. I think.
I'm half kidding, but I think it is true that you could get a very good advice from ChatGPT for startup formation, payroll, all that sort of
Yeah.
things.
I will say I also do use a real legal team as well. And so I don't fully trust ChatGPT to do all of my like legal document creation and review quite yet. But maybe someday.
Wow. So software engineers still have a job, and lawyers still have a job. That's the takeaway.
Yeah.
Excel.
Yeah, real quick, if we could hit, we have someone who was wondering, perhaps you can elaborate if there was a potential moment or a catalyst that really caused you to see a need for pipelines.
Yeah, so again, most of it arose out of my experience at Mercor, where, you know, again, it's kind of part of the culture, but also I felt like the operations team was working unnecessarily hard when there was like a pretty uh, clean software solution to most of the things that they were doing. And so that was the main need. Mercor is now a $10 billion company that's built on pretty ad hoc third-party tools. And so I wanted to build something that myself as an operator would have liked to use. And again, I think the main thesis is that Mercor has huge clients that are paying tons of money to collect human data, but they're also burning a lot of cash because the methods of collection are not very effective or efficient. And so a lot of money ends up just kind of going down the drain if you're collecting the wrong data or collecting it inefficiently and that kind of thing. So I think as the industry continues to expand, what becomes really important is being the most effective partner for data collection. And eventually like cost is going to start becoming more important. And so those were kind of like the initial sparks of the idea, but also something that's important to me is like ensuring a really good expert experience. And so obviously when you want to integrate humans into your training pipelines, they're also involved in the process. And so you want to ensure that like they're receiving information that's relevant to them, the experience as far as like how they're creating data or how they're evaluating models is also really clean and rewarding for them. And so that was like another big point of inspiration behind like the product is how do you retain the experts that you work with? How do you ensure that they're having a good experience, that all of the instructions and communications are clear, and that they're also able to derive a good experience? And so again, I think it's my belief that not only are the frontier labs going to continue to need human data, but like new smaller labs that are emerging, or if you want to do fine tuning, companies may have to utilize their internal employees to help with like fine tuning and evaluations, and wanting to ensure that both them and the folks assisting with that evaluation and data creation are having a good experience.
Yeah, I think the pinpoint you laid out resonated with me tremendously, even for smaller companies, right? I was the senior VP of AI at Palo Alto Networks. We have to label some data to see the answers, customer support, answer is right or wrong, right? And I ran into this exactly same pinpoint as you kind of laid out.
Yeah.
If I may, just quickly, if you're pressed on time, no worries. But you had mentioned the importance of internal team development, right? And of course, that can mean something different to many people. And I'm just wondering, now, as you're founding your own company, do you have any advice, perhaps something tangible, specific? What does that really mean? Any screening process? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so I'll say there's obviously multiple things I think that you need to consider when hiring a team, and it boils down to like fit, technical ability, and also like the culture that you're trying to develop. And so I think all of those things are important to screen for. Some job postings will have like years of experience requirements and things like that. I do think in general, a lot of young talent is discounted just because they're young. So I think sometimes it makes sense to give more responsibility to younger folks who just like show a lot of promise and talent. And so I think again, that's something that Mercor did pretty well, is like their team for a long time was made up of young individuals. But I think there's always a balance, because I think specifically for engineering, you get a lot of really important learnings and insights from having worked in the industry for a few years. And so I think it's a balance between like having young, excited talent that shows a lot of promise, and also kind of seasoned veterans that are able to like lead your company in a promising direction. So I think that's something that I'm thinking about, is both kind of balancing leaders that can, and leaders can come from young people as well, but I think like managers and leaders are different from executors. And so I think that's a balance that you have to find and be able to identify in people, whether they're going to be like a leader and like a manager of other people in the organization, or whether they're kind of like a heads down, get things done kind of person. And both are incredibly valuable. But those are some of the things that I'm thinking about. Awesome. I will have to hop off in a minute, but anything that I can answer to wrap up?
No, this is all great. We're already, almost 20 minutes past the half an hour. I really appreciate your time.
Of course.
Good luck with your new journey.
Thank you.
The moment I saw you first time, I was really impressed. I think you showed us, your thought process. I think more people will benefit from your thought process, and wish you nothing but great journey ahead.
Thank you so much. It was great chatting with both of you.
Look forward to the beta release, 1 to 2 months.
Yeah, I'll keep you updated.
Got it.
Okay.
Have a wonderful day.
Awesome.
Okay. Have a nice one. Bye-bye.